In this lesson, we'll begin discussing transparency and effects. If you'd like to follow along, go under the File menu to Open, and in the Sample Files folder, scroll down to 1401, Transparency Basics, and just click Open. All of the effects in InDesign in some way involve transparency. Why don't we open the Effects panel? And we're going to talk about the top section of the effects panel, which has to do with opacity and something called blending modes. We're going to select these top 4 rectangles. The other rectangles are in a layer that is actually locked. So we don't have to worry about selecting the bottom rectangles when we click and drag across the top rectangles. I'm going to go back into the effects panel. And why don't we start by talking about opacity? This controls how transparent a selected object is, from totally opaque at 100% to totally transparent at 0%. Why don't I go back up to 100? To the left are the blending modes. This controls how the color in the top objects will affect the colors in all of the objects that are under it. Normal, which you'll use most often, has absolutely no effect on the bottom colors. You can't see through the colors at all when the opacity is 100% and the blending mode is normal. Let me go to the next blending mode, which is multiply. And we're going to talk about the blending modes that are used most often in InDesign. Multiply will make the colors underneath the top objects much darker. You'll see this used most often with shadow effects. The next blending mode is screen. Screen will use the top colors to make the colors under the top objects much lighter. You'll see screen used most often with glow effects. Now let's talk about hue. And hue actually uses the top color to colorize the color underneath. And there's also color, which can be very similar. In this case, I saw very little change. Sometimes the best way to select a blending mode is to actually play with a variety of choices. Let me do that. I'm going to choose something called hard light. Hard light is almost as if you had a color light, that's the color of the top object, and it's shining on the objects underneath. So if you can't find exactly the right blending mode, choose another. Play with the various blending modes to find the right one. Like, for instance, do I want multiply? Or do I want something called darken? And you can see it made a minor difference. So to find exactly the right blending mode for an effect you're trying to achieve, play with the similar blending modes to find the one that's closer to what you want. And don't forget, you can actually combine a blending mode with opacity, which would be slightly different because it's more transparent. In upcoming lessons, we'll continue discussing effects and transparency.